Greetings and welcome to Education in Focus, powered by Chalkboard News. I'm Dan McCaleb, Vice President of News and Content at Franklin News Foundation, which publishes chalkboardnews.com. Chalkboard is a news website dedicated to issues related to K through 12 education. Joining me again today is Chalkboard's K through 12 editor, Brendan Clary. How are you, Brendan?
I'm doing well, Dan. How about you?
I am doing well, thank you, Brendan. We are recording this on Monday, November 20th. Thanksgiving Day is just a few days away. What are you thankful for this year, Brendan? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm thankful for my family. You know, I have two little ones that are crazy. Sometimes I'm sure they get picked up by the microphone. So, you know, very grateful for them and, you know, that they're growing like weeds here. So how about you, Dan?
Thank you for asking, Brendan. Same here with my family. My kids have been away at college. They both go to school 1,000 miles away from my home in the suburbs of Chicago. My wife and I got to fly down and see my daughter, who got baptized in the Baptist church in Texas last Thursday night. Spent a few days with her. She is not coming home, unfortunately, for Thanksgiving. But my son is, and he's actually on his way home now. Could be home within an hour or so. So absolutely thankful for his safe arrival here and spending several days with him. Let me also say happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners out there. Brendan, the federal government compiles data around reported incidents of bullying from schools across the country. The data is broken down based on reported incidents of bullying or harassment tied to a victim's race, their sex, their disability, or whatever other reason. There's some interesting findings based on this latest survey. Tell our listeners about it, Brendan.
Yeah, this is a big survey. So the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, they release data every few years. And this was from the 2020 to 2021 school year. It was actually delayed a little bit because of the pandemic. But they have massive amounts of data, and they survey public schools from preschool to grade 12. And basically, it is in order to provide the federal government and members of the public with data about, you know, how students have educational opportunities because of federal civil rights laws. So they're mandated to do this and report this. So it's a massive trove. And so what I focus on in the piece that I wrote for Chalkboard was sort of just one smaller example of that, but it is a wide range of education related data. I mean, talking about harassment and bullying, different kinds of school offenses, different kinds of student discipline, different kinds of access to different courses. So sort of basically a lot of different sectors of the student experience at schools nationwide, right? A large swath of information. But what I found in that data in the survey that I've focused on so far is that white students were much more likely to report bullying, harassment on account of their sex or disability than other groups, which, you know, were more likely to report being bullied based on race or that different kinds of things. So it's just an interesting sort of breakdown in terms of how the data looks. So I'm happy to drill into anything. Did you have any other specific questions about that?
I guess I don't know if this is a good thing or this is another one of those COVID era things, though. But the last year the data was available, 2020, 2021, there were 42,500 allegations of students being harassed or bullied across the country. That's down significantly from 135,200 allegations reported in the 2015-2016 school year. I mean, that's a huge drop over the course of, less than a decade. But 2020 also was a COVID year. Was there fewer allegations of this because of COVID? Or
I think that's something that's challenging to try to parse out, and that's something that the agency says, this is a discrepancy. This is different in terms of the data because it was a COVID year. So a lot of the schools had some kind of hybrid or virtual and in-person sort of schooling that year. Some of them were only a very small percentage of schools, from what I remember seeing, were in school the whole time, right? Because of, the different disruptions from, COVID. And so that does probably play into that. It's hard to tell exactly how much. And so that's one of the challenging parts about making some of these grand statements about, the differences from year over year, right? But what we can look at is percentages of those, of those allegations of harassment, right? Because those could be virtual, those could be, I'd be experiencing this even on a virtual school, right? And so that, I think, does carry over from, the last decade, basically, and that's something that I wanted to get into, is basically over that time, how have students sort of differentiated and how do students of those categories sort of report bullying. And there was more white students reporting bullying based on their sex or disability than there was in the 2015-2016 school year.
Right. And for blacks and Hispanics, though, there were more incidents of bullying based on their race. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I'm trying to look at the breakdown here, but yeah, essentially that there were more students, more white students were reporting basically that they were being bullied on the basis of sex or disability, and some of them, about 30% of white students said that they were bullied on the basis of race. Black or African American students, 37% of Black or African American students said that they were bullied on the basis of race, while only making up 15% of nationwide enrollment at schools. So there's, an outsized portion there based on saying, hey, we've experienced bullying, harassment based on race. And same thing with Hispanic or Latino students. They make 28% of the national enrollment. Only 16% said that they experienced, they reported allegations of harassment based on race. And so they were actually the lowest of any group to report these kinds of allegations. With white students, they made 46% of the national enrollment at K-12 schools. They reported 70% of all of the allegations around disability. That was 70%. So white students make up 46% of enrollment, and they've reported 70% of the harassment around disability and 68% around sex. And so that it's just kind of an interesting breakdown if you look at that those are, the students who are reporting these different kinds of harassment.
So bullying of any kind, I think, Brendan, you and I would hope all of our listeners can agree on is something that should not be tolerated at schools or anywhere else. Does this report, and if it doesn't, that's fine, does this report address any potential solutions to how to reduce the number of incidents of bullying?
I don't think it has any solutions about that. And I think that's the hard part, is that this is just data, I believe, in terms of, this is how many students were disciplined. 786,000 students received in-school suspension, 638,700 received one or more out-of-school suspensions. So it just kind of really gets into, here's just the raw data. And I think that's the harder thing, is to figure out, what kinds of policies can effectively address that. Some schools, they are really pushing social emotional learning. Like, if we can get students to get along, restorative justice. I've written about some of these things, and they have their detractors, right? They have people saying maybe there's a better way to do that. So that's the hard part, Dan, is trying to figure out how to quell this.
Well, as we've talked about before, bullying's been around as long as schools have been around and more, but that's all the time we have today. Brendan, listeners can keep up with this story and all stories related to K-12 education at chalkboardnews.com. For Brendan Clary, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening, and have a happy Thanksgiving.